So today's topic is navigating cyber risk for current times, and joining us are TrustRe. TrustRe provides reinsurance protection to many leading direct insurance companies in their geographical area of operation in the form of treaties on proportional and non-proportional basis with a sizable underwriting capacity. They also offer factor reinsurance in many classes and offer services including life and health insurance. As cyber attacks during current times and across all spectrums are increasing both in frequency and magnitude, organizations and individuals need to find effective solutions. This session will highlight and touch upon what cyber risks are, privacy legislation around the region, and the ways of protection, including cyber risk, insurance coverage, and service. Joining us today, we have with us, thank you for joining us, gentlemen, we have Kamal Tabaja. Kamal is the Group Chief Operating Officer of TrustRe. He began his reinsurance career with TrustRe back in 2002 in the treaty department, and later he moved several positions and is now the Group Chief Underwriter. He was Group Chief Underwriter and now is the Group Chief Operating Officer. Welcome, Kamal.
Thank you, Suzy.
We also have with us Thiagarajan Natrujana, we call him Thiago for today, who is a Senior Underwriter Specialty Lines at TrustRe. He's also a fellow member of the Insurance Institute of India, as well as Associate of Chartered Insurance Institute UK, and a registered professional liability underwriter with the USA-based professional liability. Thiago has been with TrustRe leading their general liability and professional and financial risk portfolios. Welcome, Thiago. We also have with us Anesti Demopoulos, who is Risk Manager, Information Security and Privacy at TrustRe. He's a risk management professional specializing in information security and privacy and leading operational risk management activities. Throughout his career, he has worked in areas of IT risk, security, governance, privacy, internal audits, and business continuity, and serves many clients from senior positions in the Middle East, as well as the region and in Europe. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Suzy. Thank you.
So, Kamal, I'll let you begin, and then we'll move into it.
Thank you, Suzy. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. First, I would like to thank you all for joining us today on this important subject. These difficult times, I would like to thank our partner, FinTech Bay, for the support in making this success, and the TrustRe team members for making this happen. It's a pleasure to see the diversity in attendance and the countries that are present on this FinTech here today. It's also great to have Mr. Talal Zain today, our CEO, joining this session, which is great support. First, I hope you and your families and colleagues are all well and good health. I believe we have all been put in a force majeure situation in the past 2 months, taking a significant leap in adapting to new ways of living, working, and most of all, communicating. Some of us, definitely through our professional lives, the way we lead our business, may have already been used to this nature of communicating, being on the road all the time, etc. But I believe the majority of our communities, our families, our colleagues, were probably not ready for all these events as they happened. This pandemic has accelerated digital transformation in our personal and professional lives, which in my opinion was already progressing prior to these events. But they were slow in being adopted by organizations, by governments, by communities. I do not believe it was on the top priority for everyone, despite a lot of people talking about FinTech and InsurTech and new ways of communication. But I believe this event has now put a pressure on everybody to be aligned, to move forward as quickly as possible, to safeguard their business and their operations. As we have seen in other world events, I think today's history will be marked with a new reference date. We used to use before AD and BC. I think now we will be using AC after Corona and BC before Corona to highlight some of these historical timelines. Moving on to cyber risk, I think cyber risk has been around for decades. It's nothing new, although we talk a lot about it in the last few years or a decade to say. It has been around since the start of computer networks. It aggravated and accelerated after the internet boom in the mid-90s. And it has been elevated to further levels as the world has become more of an interconnected small village, which we have now seen its extent in the last 2 months, and we will see it in the foreseeable future, if not more. There is no doubt that obviously cyber risk, with its challenges and threats have now accelerated. We see governments, organizations, corporations, and even us personally are all suspect to heightened risks of data breaches, identity thefts, as large proportion were not fully ready or guarded against such events or ready for this immediate shift. In the last 2 years, most countries in the Middle East and some large industrial companies from refining to manufacturing have been subject to these cyber attacks. They're for various reasons out there. They could be due to cyber terrorism. It could be related to cybercrime, embezzlements, and they have had some substantial financial damages and business interruptions to these operations that either were uninsured, they have not taken cyber breaches as a matter of seriousness on their risk agenda within the corporations or within their boards, and they have been prone to a lot of cyber liability claims from the clients. Now, such risks can have a major operational and financial damages to corporations. It's even more damaging now. In these days, if a technology ecosystem fails in this environment, the time taken to restart could be more time consuming, with the limitations of bringing vendors on site, coordination issues, especially if you are working in a global environment where you have branches, you have staff across the globe in different time zones. And the most important part is that today, everyone, your clients, your consumers, your staff are fully reliant on being online. And as we have seen, and you probably attended various webinars in the past couple of weeks regarding the COVID-19 issue, we are looking at least a 12-month plus of a suppression timeline where there will be relaxation and will be tightening of government procedures that will be taken in place, which means a lot of people will still have to work from home. They have to rely on this technology-driven platforms. Hence, to mitigate and limit those damages, there has to be an alternative risk transfer and assistance mechanisms where we believe insurance comes into play. And it should be more demanded today than it was just a few months back. We believe the insurance market has a lot to offer. Regulators definitely play a big role in highlighting risks and formulating regulations and guidance on dealing with such risks. And in some cases, insurance could be imposed to a certain limit when these risks affect the well-being of the companies in any country and their clients, as we have seen in earlier years where D&O has become obligatory, P&I, liabilities, etc. However, organizations should not wait for regulators to make it mandatory cover. They need to be proactive in having the minimum protection from a risk approach perspective and governance, appropriate governance, to protect themselves and their clients. We believe that insurers should be brought more into the formation of regulations to offer such solutions. Cyber liability is at the high end or at the peak of these risks. It should be a major concern for those that are dealing with customer data, information, medical records, as we see with hospital, banks, exchanges, IT companies that do install the equipment in certain companies because they are, there's vendor liability as well on the type of equipment that is being offered to organizations. And the vast majority of claim figures that are seen across the globe are more tilted always towards liability compared to the actual physical damages that companies or institutions have after a cyber breach. As the world will accelerate more towards Internet of Things in the coming years, this will change We will see more physical damage losses because industrial breaches like power plants, refineries, petrochemicals, and other larger corporations will be prone to these attacks and to these. It could be political, it could be just personal interference by people that are rookies there, just doing it for fun. But as we see, political cyber risk is one of a concern to many different countries. Not to prolong my introduction, I think we all need to change our approach to cyber challenges and risks. As the reliance of technology will grow rapidly, it has to be part of our strategies. It has to be on board agendas. It has to be on senior management agendas in the face of recent events. We need to identify insider and external risks, and ultimately we need to find ways to transfer some of that risk where insurance has and will always play a big role. As an insurance community, we have always been on the forefront of challenges and when they arise, as we see now with the COVID-19, where we are working to find solutions for such covers, whether through life or health covers. I do hope you enjoy the presentation and the panel discussions today. We have, great panelists that are expert at this subject. And hopefully that will enable you to sign off from this meeting today with a set of mind to transform your organizational risk assessment for such current and future threats that we all need to take on board seriously. Thanks again for your time, making the time to join us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. So we're going to begin with Anistis. I think we're going to go on to the presentation. I think you can see on your screen, we've got, we're sharing the screen for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Suzy. Thank you, Kamal, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for joining our session today. We have prepared a few slides. I'm going to talk about some key trends and current examples of cyber risks. And we try to link it also to data privacy issues, how we protect personal data, and together also give a view of the regulatory environment in Bahrain and the region overall. And then we're going to move further on and discuss about more specifically about cyber risk insurance as one of the ways to transfer the risk, as Kamal mentioned before. And of course, we're open to discuss and answer any questions you have. So we can go with the next one. I hope you can see the slides, sir. Suzy, it should be okay, right?
I can see that here. So Anisti, in your opinion, what is the current cyber risk landscape locally in Burberry? And is this applicable also to the, is it also applicable to the FinTech ecosystem?
Sure, yes. Well, cyber risk, we see that the last few years coming very high in the top 5 or top 10 risks in the globally for other organizations, top business risks. So it's an issue that we get more and more attention, and it's coming very high in the agenda of the boards globally, especially for financial service sector also. And we see that from all the surveys and the analysis we see from the analysts there, it's for financial services, it's getting more attacks, let's say. It's one of the most targeted sector. We have here some data from a recent survey from IBM, just to give you a glimpse of some key figures over there. From the end of 2019 going to 2020, there's a lot of attention on malware attacks. Malware that can be downloaded through a phishing attack or another way in our systems in the IT environment of a company, create a number of impacts there. A lot of records being compromised throughout 2019, and there's a huge increase of that, 200% increase of that, more than 8 billion records there being compromised, exposed. And also ransomware. Ransomware attacks are getting a lot of attention. There's an increase in ransomware incidents, let's say, more than 60% at the end of 2019. At the same time, we see a lot of crypto hijacking or crypto miners, let's say, coming into the picture, which is the case where someone is trying to use the resources of your IT environment to produce cryptocurrency in a very high level explanation, which is getting a lot of attention, and it's something that can go undetected also for a long time. Beyond the financial service sector, also, if we go to the industrial environment, like talking about operational technology incidents, getting a lot of attention, a huge increase there, more than 2,000%. And also, Internet of Things is something that gradually comes into the picture, and attackers are trying to take advantage of any vulnerabilities there and security issues and use it in a malicious way. There are two very important statistics on the right side. You will see that the average time to identify and contain a breach is more than 270 days, more than 9 months. This means that from the time that this started happening until the point that you identify that and you'll be able to contain can be more than 9 months. And this is actually the average period of time between the different incidents evaluated from this survey, which is a long period. And you can understand that many things can happen throughout these 9 months. And also the cost of a data breach, the average number here is close to 4 million USD. And again, it's an average number. There are other cases where this can have a higher cost for a company. Not to mention, of course, the cost to the reputation of the company or the trust to the company from the customers and so on. If we talk about the FinTech environment, you understand that all these risks we discuss right now are becoming get more importance due to the overall digital operating model they have. Okay, so this can come throughout their value chain in all their operations, the way they interact with the clients, mobile applications, and the digital models they operate. So that the threat landscape, as we say, can be higher and can be many ways when a cyber threat can actually materialize.
Well, thank you for that. And how do you see the cyber risk environment changing in general with the current outbreak, with the pandemic outbreak? Like, how is it changing in this environment?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Kamal mentioned a few points already. I mean, right now, operating in this environment with a pandemic outbreak going on, we see that all the companies are introducing and using some remote working from home models and increasing remote connections to their systems. Maybe sometimes try to expose some systems to the internet for external connections, which was not there before. So they increase the systems and the data they may have available for a remote connection over the internet. There is an increased use of video conferencing also. And sometimes there are cases where maybe the IT team may try to give some focus on delivering quickly some solutions and make the users, the employees to work effectively remotely. And there's a risk there, of course, to make it in a way that you ensure that all the controls are in place also to protect the information and systems and the users. Cyber criminals are very active right now. We see a lot of activity going on. A high level of phishing attacks also. Many emails going on to all the companies about this is an email from your HR department. Just click the link here to open a file and provide your personal details, for example. And also, there are many mobile applications and websites which are fraudulent, they are malicious. So someone may think that this site provides some statistics about COVID-19, but actually, if you open that, it may download some malware to your computer. And together with the statistics we discussed before, it's with all the focus and the effort coming up to make this remote working environment work efficiently. Remember these 9 months we discussed before, this can even take longer because we need to make sure that we give sufficient effort also and capabilities to identify and respond to cyber attacks. So if we summarize here, the risk areas, it's about making sure we have the right security configuration in place. A company may have also a number of assets like mobile devices, laptops, desktops outside their common office environment. So there's a increased threat of physical theft, for example. We talk about the stretch IT support services when we make sure we leave some room for the security response team also. Proper authentication services in place, that's very important. And also we need to make sure that the way we protect and exchange personal data should be in a controlled way. As we talk again about phishing attacks, they're getting a lot of importance, especially if a company allows also communication through other ways of other email accounts outside the corporate email accounts. So using Gmail, Outlook, or any other kind of non-corporate email accounts, how we make sure that over there, the controls over phishing attacks and the filters we apply are adequate. And also ransomware attacks, it's happening already. We see that getting more traction with the current environment. And video conference hijacking, this is something new that comes up. As more and more users are using video conferencing facilities, there were cases reported where someone was able to connect unauthorizedly to a video conference section to display some inappropriate material and so on. So there should be a very strict, secure configuration over there also.
Well, that makes sense. So how are these cyber risks usually initiated? How are they usually, and can this differentiate, is it differentiated by industry or is it other factors?
Yeah, there are many factors that affect that. I mean, it's initiated through some cyber threat actors, as we call it. Could be from activists, some people that would just try to test some systems and try to get access to that, up to criminal groups, up to state government actors, terrorist groups, and so on. Could be different type of attack initiators, let's say, over there. And also, could be we have a case where we, for example, from an employee which by mistake did something, and this can expose some company data to unauthorized users, or ex-employees that would try to initiate some data exposure, for example. And usually in these cases, we're talking about the threat actor has a combination of motivation and opportunity. These are the key factors here, okay? We understand that motivation will be higher for a financial services company, for example, when they can gain some benefit out of some money transfer and so on. And the other factor is the opportunity. And the opportunity we give to them is about how we well protect our systems to reduce the opportunity they have to do that, okay? So in every case, they use this motivation and the opportunity they have to initiate an attack.
Interesting. So if a cyber attack is successful, what is the impact of that onto an organization?
Yes, the impact could be in different levels. I mean, can be from and can start from denial of service attack, as we call it, which means that you cannot use your systems, your services, your data, system of service outage. Could be a breach into your systems, which can lead to some data breach, and this can include some personal data also, and have some, in addition to the value of this data to the company, have some regulatory implications as well. Could be some a ransomware attack, which makes your system inaccessible, and you have to pay back some money to protect them and get access to that again. Destroy some data, modify them. Lack of competitive advantage. If someone, for example, a company is preparing to launch a new solution and someone gets access to some confidential data and there's a case with the competitors there, this can be lack of a competitive advantage, for example. Regulatory implications, of course, because there are a number of regulations that require the companies to implement certain measures and report some cases to the authorities. But overall, this comes down to the trust that the company maintains and the reputation it has. This is one of the major impact, together with all the financial impact in case of a cyber attack materialize.
So talking about regulatory implications, what are the current regulatory requirements for the financial sector in Bahrain and in general, the GCC? Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. The regulatory environment, if we start from if we focus mostly on the financial services sector in Bahrain, we have the regulations from the Central Bank of Bahrain. There are rule books there for different types of financial services companies, from the banking sector, insurance sector, investment banking, and so on. And over there, they include specific requirements on what measures a company should implement to timely identify a cyber attack, respond to that, and continuously monitor the risks around that. We have some extracts here on the slide, like this is from the CBB rule book, discussing some points about the requirements for banks. There should be, for example, board and management oversight, which means that cyber risks should get discussed periodically in the board meetings and get some oversight and make sure that the measures implemented, the tone of the top steps from the board, actually. There are requirements there about the cybersecurity risk management, implement adequate security risk management frameworks, and make sure you report to the regulator, to CBP, any cyber attack that may happen within a certain period of time, within 5 days. With the latest changes in the end of 2019, they introduced also a requirement for the licenses to have a proper insurance coverage to reduce the financial losses that may face during a disaster. So it's a way to transfer the risk and overall minimize the impact of a security incident. This is for the financial sector mostly. There are other requirements for other sectors in Bahrain, and we see relevant requirements also in the overall in the GCC area from other countries and globally. And together with that, we have also an increased focus to data privacy and personal data protection. Maybe most of us heard about the EU General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which came up, which was live in 2018. And also over here in Middle East and GCC area, it's getting a lot of attention. Recently, there was a relevant law introduced in Bahrain, the Personal Data Protection Law, or we used to call it PDPL. It was introduced in 2018 and became effective from the 1st of August 2019. It's one of the first laws that came up in the region, actually. And at the same time, we see that there are attempts and they try to introduce that in other countries in the GCC also. There are relevant regulations in DIFC, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. They have something relevant, but it's specific to a specific, let's say, market over there and not across the country. Doesn't apply to all the companies in the country. There's a relevant law in Qatar also, and we see some attempts also from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and so on. So we see that this is getting a lot of attention, and it's at the same time, it's also a factor to facilitate a digital transformation and be able to use a number of services in the digital environment of a company. So this is getting a lot of attention recently, and it's we'll expect to see more and more in Bahrain and GCC.
Thank you very much, Anisti. I guess we're going to hang over to you, Tiago, and to cover the rest of the presentation. So can you tell us a little bit about what cyber insurance is?
Thank you, Suzy. First of all, before coming to that subject, happy Ramadan Kareem to you all. And it's been great to be here this afternoon. Before coming to this the subject of cyber insurance, I would rather talk a little bit for the general audience purposes about insurance. So, as you all know, different insurance is termed in different ways, and from where you are looking, where you are coming from, and who you are. For me, if you're a finance manager or a CFO coming from the finance angle, it is kind of a capital management. Or if you're coming from the risk perspective, it is kind of one of the risk transfer tools. And if you are coming from the legal aspects, it is kind of a contract. So insurance is typically kind of the risk transfer, financial risk transfer mechanism. Actually, you are not transferring the risk. The financial consequences of an event happens. What is an event? Event can be people define in many ways in many parlance. There are many insurances available. Also, for example, if it is a motor insurance, it is a motor accident. If it is let's say fire insurance, it is the fire or the any other covers that are attached to that. It's an event. So when it comes to cyber insurance, it is a cyber event. So cyber insurance is nothing but the transfer of financial consequences of a cyber event happening. So what is a cyber event here? The cyber event, the previous slides, the previous one. Yeah, so cyber insurance is defined in many ways, and people call many terms or many names to that. Some will call cyber insurances, some will call cyber liability insurances, some will call typically about privacy and data security insurances. For me, everything remains the same. So comes to cyber insurance, it's kind of a specialized type of insurances that potentially covers the risk of a data loss. The loss can be the result of a data breach caused by the computer hacker or the simple theft of a laptop, theft of a funds via computer, business interruptions caused by a virus. People think that cyber insurances is for businesses that transact a business over the internet. And then they think that they are not subject to cyber attacks or but the cyber insurance actually applies to all industries, be it the manufacturing industries, be it the financial industries, be it the transport, be it the airline, or it could be also whether it is small, medium enterprises, even every personal as an individual has to have kind of a cyber insurance policy. So, and again, when it comes to data, the data loss can be not only the electronic data or the privacy of the privacy rights due to the loss of data. It's also from the physical paper, the paper loss, and then the data is leaked from there. The cyber insurances encompasses everything. Yeah, thank you.
So what is the first party and a third party liability cover in a cyber insurance?
Yeah, that is a good question. There is always kind of what is the first party and third party liability confusions. I would like to draw the analogy to this to a simple motor insurances. For example, if you have a motor insurances, and I said it's due to a motor accident, the event can be a motor accident. If you, due to the motor accident, if you causes an injury to the third party or damages the property to the third party, it is a third party liability insurances. The other motor insurance is kind of a damage to the vehicle or the vehicle being stolen. That is called the first party insurances. When you combine both, it is called comprehensive insurances. Similarly, the cyber insurances. Cyber insurances is comprehensive insurances, covers the first party as well as the third party liability. First party is the cost or damages incurred by the business itself for them, whereas the third party is that being they are liable to the third party because of the network breach or privacy exposures and everything. So, what is the first party coverages? There are many covers available, and cyber insurance is always being innovated a lot these days. There are a lot of behind the scene because the exposures, new exposures as the insurers see, a lot of new coverages are being available. Now, but typically the first party coverages could be like the kind of a post-breach response cost. And then another cover can be business interruptions. If your business is interrupted during the cyber network breach, so the profits or the increased cost that you incur can be covered under the business interruptions. It can also cover cyber extortion. Cyber extortion. So it could be a system, your network has been subject to it. It has happened in one of the cases, banks in UAE, that there was an extortion attempt, and they put malware into the bank systems, demanding 5 million something US dollars. Unless they pay for that, they won't release the malware. So these extortions, the cost to the extortion money, or the engage expert to deal with the extortionist, can be covered under the cyber extortion. It's not only the extortions, and also in order to prevent further damage extortion attempt, you engage IT experts to prevent further extortion damage. The cost to incur them can be covered under the cyber extortion cover. What we see, another covers that are available is the social engineering. Insurers tries to shift it to the other insurances like the crime element, but there are some insurers provides cover for social engineering. Social engineering claims are rising in this part of the world. We will talk about it in the coming days, in the coming slides. What is the difference between the social engineering and then the funds transfer thing. On the liability side, the privacy and network liability, there are increasing regulatory exposures, defense cost and the penalties, cost to engage a lawyer to defend you, and then the settlement cost as well can be covered under the under the privacy and network liability. One of the important aspect is PCI DSS now compliant. If you are subject to PCI DSS standards, and the system is compromised, if there are fines and penalties imposed by the coming from this PCI DSS standards, the policy will provide for the fines and penalties as well. There is a question already on whether the fines and penalties, what fines and penalties are covered. Whether I would say that the fines are of two types. One is the civil fines. The other one is the criminal fines, and again, another fines is regulatory fines. The regulatory fines are covered under the policy, under the regulatory defense and penalties. The civil fines are covered only when insurable under the respective law. There is a question why, what is when insurable law? It all depends on the contract. Some contract says, but generally you need to bear in mind, civil fines are where insurable under the law, and it doesn't say, the law doesn't say whether it can be insurable or not. Even for example, the case of GDPR fines or even PDPL fines, Bahrain personal data protection laws, you are subject to, I think about 20,000, and you are also subject to criminal actions. Or you may be going to a jail. But then the PDPL talks about BHD, Bahrain dinar 20,000. In fact, GDPR talks about 4% of the global turnover. So whether these fines and penalties can be covered under the insurance policies, and but the law is very silent whether it is can be insurable or not. So when it is silent, when the law is silent whether it can be insurable or not, the policy typically provides coverage. So that is the one thing I need to talk about, because there's a lot of confusion going around what fines and penalties can be covered. Criminal fines are not insurable and cannot be covered under any insurance policies. The another liability that comes from is the website or media liability. So this is the comprehensive insurances. and covers both the first party and third party liability. Thank you, Suzy.
Thank you very much. I think you just mentioned media liability. Can you explain that a little bit more?
The media liability. The media liability is typically like errors and omissions.
I think you have a slide. To change a slide.
Yeah. Yeah, media liability is typically like an errors and omissions. So when you and then website makes it very easy to notice the breach of copyright, or when you publish anything on your websites or social media, it could be unintentionally. So you are subject to certain actions from include for the defamation, libel, copyrights and trademarks infringement, false advertising, plagiarism. I wanted to tell here there is a recent case in the Europe or Germany, that one of the transport or warehousing company, they store the goods that are subject to infringed or subject to copyright and trademark issues. The transport, the warehousing company has been sued. So even when you hold the goods that are subject to copyright or trademark issues, you are subject to actions. So the media liability typically covers for the legal fees that you have to incur to defend yourself, and as well as settlement and judgment cost, judgment money. So, and you have the responsibility of all contents, even if you did not write it. This is very important. But another one I said earlier about criminal one, the media liability does not cover deliberate actions. It's so you need to, if you deliberately infringe someone's copyrights or trademarks, or your standards, defame someone deliberately, so the media liability typically does not provide cover for. So it's a civil liability coverages. Okay. Thank you, Suzy.
I just want to say, we have quite a few questions from the audience, so I'm going to shift a little bit to the audience. We have Pavan Deshpande is asking, the panels you can see on the Q&A. New buzz in the market is blockchain. Does it cover under cyber risk? If I know who would like to direct that question to, Kamal, and any yardsticks to measure losses or identify false claims?
I think, yes, definitely. Blockchain is, I mean, it's part of, it's one of the technology platforms that has seen rises in the last, couple of years. And it will be used for different aspects, whether with exchanges, whether for company placements. Banks have started to use it in different ways. And I think, the ways to measure losses or identify false claims is done, when a breach does happen, there are, forensic companies, there are investigators that come on board to identify first, if it's an external breach, then, it can be identified. If it's an internal breach, I think this becomes a bit more of a difficult one where they need to identify this. And, I think nobody can guarantee always 100% on the legitimacy, as with any insurance claims, anyways, in any incident that would happen. But I think surveyors and loss adjusters, especially cyber loss adjusters, they have their tools and investigative tools to be able to arrive to such a conclusion. And we have seen it in the markets as well.
Thanks, Kamal. Pavan, I hope that answered your question. We also have a gentleman called John Matthews who's with us, and he's asking, how is cyber attack defined by the regulations?
Yes, if I can take this one. The regulations are talking about any significant cyber attacks that happening for a company to report that appropriately to the authorities. And the meaning behind that is that every company should have a way to measure and identify and take proper actions depending on the size and the impact of a cyber breach. cyber attack in this case. It's a different thing, for example, to have a phishing mail coming into your network to a few users and just identify that and stop it there. It's a different thing having a cyber attack which going on for a number of months, can expose certain company data, and you need to take more actions to mitigate the risks. The regulations from the authorities are talking about have a proper cyber risk management framework in place, identify the risks, measure them, and report any, at least the significant ones, to the authorities within a certain period of time.
He's also asking, how do you risk survey a prospective insurant for its cyber risk?
If I may take that question, how is cyber attack defined by the regulations? Actually, it's an interesting question, but in the context of the insurance policies, it could be many. Some will call the network security breach, or some will call the data breach. This is which typically means, in my view, it's kind of an unintentional, unauthorized access to a computer network, or the transmission of malicious transmission of a malicious code due to a failure of computer security. This could be a typical, cyber attack, or the network security breach, or the data breach.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We have Jamal Sharaf is asking, the healthcare sector in Bahrain and probably in the GCC seems to be ignoring cybersecurity risks, especially those impacting data privacy. How can cyber insurance help in creating awareness within the sector to encourage them to invest in their security and data privacy protection? I mean, that's very important to do this time. So I don't know, Kamal, maybe, or
yeah, sure. I'll take this this question. Thank you, Jamil, for your question, which is actually quite valid. And it's not only in the health sector. It could be to do with many other sectors where it involves clients, which I already alluded that in my introduction. I think everything starts with there are organizations that are proactive. They do look at these risks in a very serious matter. A lot of these attacks have happened, and some of them have happened on the NHS in the UK, has happened on the similar government health organizations in the US, and we have seen significant breaches there. However, I believe, and this is, I guess, just as part of the culture in this region, is that insurance somehow is looked at more of a low priority, and it's only being used where it's a requirement. So I think regulators do have a big part to play in this, and as we said, with privacy data and making sure the client's information is well protected. And I think the first sectors that need to have, I believe, a minimum protection needs to be guided by the regulators, by the ministries of trying to buy these protections, and ensuring as well that, as we said, the companies come in to measure or to survey, these hospitals or clinics, etc., to make sure that they have the right security measures for their IT systems in place. And this goes in line with John Matthews' question about the surveys. There is a lot of engineering companies, specialized companies that do come in, they do penetration testing on the systems. They check the vulnerabilities, the proxies, the firewalls, what are the measurements, internal measurements that companies take. For example, today, we work in a remote environment. We have users sitting in different locations. They could be in homes. They could be sitting in remote offices because of the social distancing measure that has to happen. And I think companies need to safeguard that. They need to make sure the end user, because when you are working in a controlled environment within your company, your systems are made for that purpose. But once you go out and you become very remote, the risks elevate. You have users sitting in their houses. Have you, for example, stopped USB usage on their computers? Have you done other controls to make sure that nothing leaks out into your network, especially if you're using a VPN connection, where any threat from outside could easily come in, including phishing, etc. I'm not sure if that answers the questions, but I think regulations and ministries and us as insurers can come in hand to provide these solutions.
By the way, I was working with when it comes to the health sector, cyber insurances. Regulators are seriously looking at putting some minimum insurance requirements for healthcare and healthcare providers. We were working through, for example, we are working through Dubai Health Authority and Dubai Health Insurance Commission. They are seriously looking at putting a mandatory, at least minimum requirement for all the healthcare facilities that handle health data, PHI data. Similar regulations are being talked about in other parts of the GCC. Bahrain is also contemplating, I think, similar on the DHSS. But once the DHA implements this mandatory insurance, cyber insurance requirements, but I think the other GCC countries will catch up soon. What is the coverages are typically, they will also prescribe, these are the coverages and these are the limits that are the healthcare providers take. It is not only for the establishments, but also for the private health personnel. That means individual doctors who does, it's similar like a medical malpractice cover before you enter into this profession. You need to produce a copy of the insurance policies. Yeah.
I'm very amazed. There's a lot of questions out there. I'm sure the panelists can also see online. We have quite a few people asking various questions, from things like what are the proper controls for remote working, for example. We've got quite a few questions on how to navigate now and what is next. Also things in terms of what your top recommendations are in terms of going forward and how organizing spaces should be considering going ahead the purchase of cyber insurance. I think you can see the Q&A.
Suzy, if I could take this one from Mohammed about controls on remote working, just a quick comment on that. I mean, of course, it's difficult to answer that in a generic context, but you need to put it in context. But I think overall, each company need to think about three factors. I mean, on the one hand, you need to enable the remote work, ensure adequate performance and all that, but you need to keep a balance with security controls and configuration in place. So it's about performance and security and keep a balance there. The second thing is about make sure you have adequate controls to your most critical data. Identifying what are the most critical data and making sure you have adequate controls in place over them to avoid an exposure. This is a critical factor there. And the third one is about training and user security awareness. That's very important. So you make sure that your users working on site or remotely, they can be able to identify any indicators there and respond adequately to any phishing attacks and so on. So I think these three factors should keep in mind, everyone trying to protect the overall this remote working environment.
Thank you, Anesti. So I think we have time for one more question, and then I think any questions that we haven't answered, you feel free as well to get in touch with us at info@bahrainfintechbay.com.
Suzy, I think Bahrain FinTech Bay wanted to answer one of the questions on the remote working. So we would like to hear their views, definitely.
Beg your pardon? Sorry, Kamal.
I saw that it says Bahrain FinTech Bay would like to answer the question for remote working. I'm not sure if that's somebody from your side.
That's from my side. Yeah, that's just
okay.
Controlling it. We're the panelists.
The moderator.
Yeah, but I would love to hear any questions. I mean, I think this has been for me especially, and I'm sure for the audience, lots of great questions. It's been a very big eye opener because we have all of this is on our mind, and we're using a lot of this technology and going through this at this time without really knowing a lot of the risks. And it's all come very fast, obviously. So it's about navigating our way through this. If I have any more, Kamal, would you like to just give a closing statement as well? From my side, thank you very much for joining us, Trust Re. Thank you for the panelists as well, all of you, and for the participants, of course. As I said, feel free to get in touch with us. We can also get you in touch with Trust Re to ask if you have any more questions that they need to answer for you.
No, thank you very much, Suzy and FinTech, FinTech Bay team. This has been great. I hope this has been very insightful. Thank you for the panelists, the presenters. I hope we can do this again with maybe a different subject as we move forward. We are always open to your questions and happy to answer them and to advise you in this region on how you can progress within your organization. Insurance is always, we are always good people to talk to. They are quite insightful, and then we could be of help to you. Thank you so much, and enjoy your weekend, and Ramadan Kareem to everybody.
Ramadan Kareem, everyone. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Suzy.